All right. All right. 10 a.m. We good to get started? We good? All right. Welcome to week 3, day 2. Today we're going to talk about CRUD with Express. But before we get into that, let's revisit yesterday. What did you learn about yesterday? As a refresher. You learned about EJS. What is EJS? Okay, you learned about EJS, which is an HTML templating engine, right? And how do we utilize EJS? How does it help us as web developers? What do we use it to do? That's pretty good. We use it for server-side rendering. We use it as a template. We have an HTML template, and then we use JavaScript variables to plug into different areas, and we can incorporate logic JavaScript. But it's important to remember that that's all server-side. We're doing everything server-side. What gets sent to the client is pure HTML. Okay. What else did you learn about yesterday? Anything here? Did you learn about web servers? Setting up. Okay. Anything about web servers? What does a web server do? Lets us connect to it. What does us mean in that? What are the us that can connect to a web server? Clients. Clients can connect to servers. And why do clients connect to servers? What do servers do? They do a lot, but the clue is in the name. What does a server at a restaurant do? Serve. They don't actually host services. They are a service. Web servers serve up data to clients who want to consume it. Clients make a connection via HTTP, and then they get served data, documents, whatever that server happens to be serving up. Okay, so now let's get into today. So we're going to be talking about CRUD. Has anyone ever heard of CRUD before? Can anyone tell me what CRUD stands for at all? Yes, perfect. Read, update, and delete. Perfect. I actually prefer instead of CRUD. And so if we map these out, let's just take a quick look at what. So if we map all these out, obviously create a new resource, right? We'll just use a general term. We'll call it a resource, some kind of resource on the server. Read. Well, let's jump to update. Update would be update a resource. And delete, obviously, would be to delete a resource. But read actually has two components to it. Because we can read all of our resources, whatever the particular resource is, or we can read individual ones, right? Like we can look at all of our users, for instance, or we could look at user with the ID of 2. Right? So read in CRUD is actually broken into 2 separate segments. We can either read all of the resource or a particular resource, right? You can look at all of the shortened URLs, or you can look at one particular shortened URL, right? So for that reason, I actually prefer bread, because bread divides up the 5. So we have browse, read, scroll down a bit. How is the font size at the back? Is it good? Awesome. Add, and delete. So the key difference between bread and CRUD is that the read is broken up into browse and read. So browse would represent retrieving all of the resource, all of the shortened URLs that are in your database, all of the users that are in your database. And read would be a particular shortened URL, a particular user. Okay? So that's why I prefer bread over CRUD. Okay? Now, we've got that taken care of. What is HTTP? Does anybody remember last week? There's a super stimulating lecture that we had last Wednesday. Does anybody remember what HTTP stands for? Hypertext? Yeah, exactly. Something protocol. Something that starts with T. Perfect. And we are going to utilize HTTP today. And how do we know, just as a quick aside, how do we know that we're communicating over HTTP? How would we, if we're in a web page, how do we know that we're going to communicate with the Compass web server over HTTP? Have you ever typed into the browser? I'm going to try and zoom in. This might get crazy. Have you ever seen this when you're typing in? You prepend the protocol to the front of the URL, right? Hopefully this isn't news to anybody. So you can actually you can actually say, I'm going to communicate over HTTP, or I'm going to communicate over HTTPS, or I'm going to communicate over the Postgres protocol. This is how we actually, so in modern browsers, the reason why you probably haven't seen this is because if you don't type anything, it just prepends HTTP :/ to the front of any URL when you type it in. If you type in google.com, but if you take this and you copy it and then you paste it somewhere, you'll see that your browser has automatically filled in the protocol that's being communicated over. So in this case, secure HTTP. Okay? So this is how we know that we're actually going to be formulating requests that look like this to be answered by our server, because we'll be putting together an HTTP server. If we wanted to listen to HTTPS requests, we'd have to put together an HTTPS server, right? Yesterday, you made a little server using the built-in HTTP package that comes with Node, right? Okay, so today, we are going to pull in Express. Did you do some reading yesterday about Express? Yes? Okay, can anybody tell me what Express is? Even a word that starts with E, I would take that at this point. Anything. It does. It absolutely makes it easier. The reason why we bring in any package into our project is not because it's doing something magic that we couldn't make ourselves. It's because why would we bother reinventing the wheel? Somebody else has already done it. So we bring these packages in to make our jobs a lot easier. We could absolutely use an HTTP package like you did yesterday and create a full web server with it. But we have to do a lot more work than if we just bring in Express and set up an Express server. So Express is like a server in a box. But there's one thing that Express allows us to do. If we look at Express, how they define themselves. Express node, is this going to get us to the Express website? There we go. This is how Express, the people who created Express, hopefully that's high enough contrast. I don't know if I can turn my dark reader on. Is that going to work? No. Okay. So, Express. Wow, that made it even worse. Okay. A fast, well, that's pretty easy to look at. Unopinionated. What does unopinionated mean? Has anyone ever heard of that? Unopinionated? What does unopinionated mean in real life? If you said, well, that would be odd to say I'm unopinionated. Sorry. No bias? You have no opinion. So the creators of Express have no real opinion on how we should be utilizing it. They wrote the most flexible framework that they could, or library that they could come up with. And they allow us to piece together other pieces of software and use them with Express however we want to use it. So what do we call those pieces of software that we incorporate into Express? They sit in between the request and the response. Middleware. That's right. They sit in the middle. One of the lecturers here used to describe Express as the infinity gauntlet. Hopefully that reference isn't too dated now. And middleware as the stones. The gauntlet is pretty free form, on its own. Doesn't really do much. But when you start popping in middleware, then all of a sudden you have the ability to snap. And it actually does something. Presumably Thanos could have snapped at any time and it just wouldn't have done anything. So that's Express. They've tried to make the most flexible framework they could so that we can put in different pieces and incorporate them into our workflow. Whatever we decide that we want to use, we're not being told by the library or framework how to utilize it. That would be what we call an opinionated framework. This one is unopinionated, in horrible contrast. All right. Okay, so web server in a box allows us to incorporate middleware into our solutions. Great. Do we need to touch on anything else? Okay, so our to-dos for today. We are going to implement bread over HTTP with Express. We are going to use forms to submit HTTP requests. And then we're going to practice some debugging. And we'll do that all throughout the day because I'm certain that we will see errors come up. Cool. Does anybody have any questions so far before we jump into actually coding? Yes?
I think I was just overthinking it, but when it says read information, is it when the server reads information to give back to the client, or is it when the client literally sees the information that's being provided by the server?
In what sense? The read? Yes, the idea behind it is that, actually, we should start talking about routes, because the idea behind that is that it's one and the same. When you make a request to read all of the resources, then the web server responds with all of the resources. It's how we formulate that request and how the server is set up to listen to certain requests.
So in this case with browsing is the client looking at the information?
Browsing would be the client making a request for all of the information.
And then reading would be the server getting the information?
That's right.
And giving it
Well, the server will gather the information from somewhere. Either they have it in memory, like we'll be doing today, or they have to hit a database or something, and then they respond with that information to the client. I don't want you to conflate being able to see it in the browser with it coming back. Clients can be almost anything. It's just something that needs to consume a resource that a web server serves up. So we have these clients and servers. But you can absolutely make, in any situation, a server can become a client. You can have a web server that makes calls to an outside web server. And in that case, your server is the client. Right. Okay, so you learned a bit about routes yesterday from KV. What are the two parts of a route? The domain is part of the path. So you'd have something like www.example.com/users, something like that, in order to get all of the users. Okay. It has another part, though. Method. There we go. Or some people refer to it as the verb. And what are some methods or verbs that we already know? Did you use any yesterday? Did you type in server.something or app.something when you were setting up your HTTP server? Sorry? Get? Absolutely. Just separate that. We have get, and what's the other famous one? Post. Yes, absolutely. And for bonus virtual cookies, does anyone know any other verbs? Sorry? Absolutely. There we go. I'll have to start stocking up on virtual cookies. And we also have patch and delete. There are other verbs, but these are the main 5. And in fact, the majority of the time, we're only going to be utilizing these 2. Okay? So what do we use get for? Pretty simple and straightforward. I'm not asking any trick questions at all. There's nothing tricky about this. What do we use get for? Getting information, exactly. That's how we make a request for information. Okay, so if we know that, what do we use post for? Post the information, sending information to the server. Maybe it's the user's login credentials. Maybe it's creating a new resource on the server, something like that. We make those with a post request. Okay? And we are going to design our routes today using something called REST. And this is yet another acronym. We love acronyms as programmers, so you got to get used to it if you don't already love them. Which stands for, and they kind of cheated a bit, Representational State Transfer, which is a fantastically long expression, and people like to talk about REST when they're talking about designing their APIs. Representational state transfer simply refers to the fact that the routes, the paths that we take to get to data, should represent the underlying data in some way. So for an example of that, let's say we've already got our domain. So we're going to make, let's say, a GET request to example.com, and we want to retrieve all of the users. How would we do that, do you think? Well, you'd probably visit the endpoint /users, right? Okay. Just as an example, let's say we want to get from example.com a certain user. How do you think we'd go about that? You touched on it yesterday with the wyverns and was the badass ghost, something like that? I can't remember what. Spooky ghost, that's right. That would be on the server side to listen for that. But if we're the client and we're making a request for that resource, what do we type in? Yes, whatever the ID is. It could be a string, it could be a number, something like that. So if we're mapping these out, this would be the browse to retrieve all of the users. This would be read. Let's see if I can line these up. There we go. So we have edit. So we want to edit this time. Yes?
Why would the colon thing work for the client side for the read?
You mean on the server where it says /users/ID, something like that? This is a variable that's utilized. Express parses the path and will pull that out as a variable. If you sent that from the client, then it would think that :ID was the ID that you're looking for. Yeah, this is a shorthand that we use on the server in order to say we're going to be getting a variable plugged into here. Okay, so we're going to edit a resource. What kind of request would we make to edit a resource? Starts with a P. Post. Very good. So that would look like, let's just start doing the endpoint. Don't have to keep typing example all the time. Okay. So we're going to edit a particular user. So what's the other piece of information that we would have to pass to the server to say we want to edit this user in particular, not just whatever user? Yes, absolutely. We need that ID again. Add. What kind of, if we want to add a new user to the post again, absolutely. And we would just hit. We don't even need the ID because that will be generated by the server. So we just make a post request to /users. And then we have delete. And in this case, I mean, it would be nice to use semantically the delete keyword. But let's just, for interest's sake, say that we're locked down to get and post. So what kind of request would we make for deleting a resource? Post request? Well, obviously, we have to hit /users, but we have to pass along something else as well, the ID. But if we look at this, we see that we're actually duplicating our path. If we say that each one of these the verb and the path make up a unique combination, then we can't have this path and this path. There's this route and this route. So we have to tack on an extra piece of information. So we would just use something like that. /delete. And does that make sense? If we had access to the delete keyword, then we wouldn't need to do that. We could just call delete, because that would make this a totally different route to this one, right? Oh, instead of post? Or here? Oh, this is how we communicate to the server what we'd like to do. This is how we're differentiating between this route and this route. Okay, so this is essentially all that REST means, is that the routes that we're getting to go to navigate to the resources, to retrieve the resources, represent the underlying structure of the data. Okay? So, and you can also, if you know that someone has implemented a RESTful API, this is what we call APIs that are built on servers that respond to RESTful routes, or REST-based routes, you can make guesses at the resources. Like, let's say we were making a get to posts. We want to see all the blog posts, right? So we'd say get to posts. If we want to see a particular one, we pass along an ID. If we wanted to see all the comments for that post, then we'd tack on /comments, right? And this would be interpreted as the comments for post number 4. And if we wanted to see a particular comment, we can chain that on. And you can actually build these out, but you can see how it defines, it mirrors the underlying resource, right? There would be posts, and there would be a particular post that I'm dragging around. And then there will be comments for that particular post, and there will be individual comments. Okay? Does that make sense? Cool. Okay. So in order to get into this, we are going to need a noun. We're going to need some kind of noun. Preferably, I mean, you did scary monsters yesterday, so we need a different noun. Anybody? Otherwise, it's going to be cats. Sorry? Cookies. I love it. Okay, so just like yesterday, instead of hitting a database or something, we're just going to have an object in memory. Okay, you'll touch on databases in week 5. But for right now, and same thing with TinyApp, we're just dealing with an object in memory. Okay? All right, so we need some cookies. I guess I can ID of 1. And so what properties would a cookie have? Toppings. I like it. Would that be an array? That might be a little, let's go with a string for right now. Toppings. Do we need a name for our cookie? That might be helpful, right? Okay, so we need a name and some toppings for a cookie. And sugar cookie. I like it. And what are the toppings on a, maybe we should change this to ingredients? If I can spell it. There we go. Ingredients, sugar. I like it. Sounds like my kind of cookie. Perfect. And we'll just copy this. Change this to 2, and we need another type of cookie. Chocolate. And then that would probably be chocolate as well. Okay. Super. And just for interest's sake, let's go with the third one so we can actually have a nice list. Getting down towards the bottom of the screen here. Okay. ID 3. One more cookie. Oatmeal. I like it. Oatmeal cookie. And presumably that one has oatmeal. And raisins? All right. We finally have a reason for ingredients. That's fantastic. I don't bake. I'm assuming that this is, in chocolate cookies, all there is chocolate. That's what I'm going with. Okay, so we have our object in memory. we've got our cookies object. I want to create an Express server. So what do I need to do? You read up on Express servers yesterday. What do you think we need to do? We're going to use a package from outside of our application. What do we need to do? We do have to require it. I haven't downloaded it yet. What order should we do those in, do you think? Okay. Fair enough. Twisted my rubber arm. Okay. So, but there's one more thing that we need to do here. All I have in this folder is a README and an app.js. Yes, package.json would be good. I'm going to initialize a Git repo, add everything, and commit to it. Initial commit. There we go. Okay, so we need to npm init, right? I'll bring this up to the top. Does everybody still see what's going on there? Okay, we need to npm init. I'm just going to pass the flag -y so that it just accepts the defaults. Okay. There we go. So it created for us package.json, and we can see that in our folder structure here. We have our package.json, and it just took all the defaults. It took the name of the folder and pulled some stuff from my README, which is fantastic. There we go. And it assumed that the way that we get into it is with app.js. Cool. Now we can install a package. How do I bring in Express? npm install Express. Perfect. Awesome. There we go. So now I should be able to require that into my project, right? Express equals require Express. Thank you, VS Code. Okay. And then we want to create an app. We can call this whatever we want. We could call this server. It's common to call it app. And we just want to create a new Express app. Okay. And then last but not least, how do we get this? How do we get our new server to actually listen for connections? We do. Let's set a port. Const port equals 3000. Sounds like a good one. Okay. And how do we tell our app to listen on that port? Dot listen. That's correct. We'll pass in the port, and then this actually takes a callback. So let's put that in there to make sure that everything is going correctly. And we can console.log. App is listening on port. There we go. So if everything works, I should be able to run node app.js, and we say app is listening on port 3000. So what happens if I try to visit localhost 3000? We get our first error of the day. Cannot get. Cannot get specifically /. Has anybody seen this error before? Saw it yesterday. Okay. And all this is doing is it's showing us the route. Cannot get to users. Okay. So our web server is saying, fine, I'm listening for HTTP requests, but you haven't told me what to do when someone makes this type of request. So how do we tell our web server that we want to listen to a particular request? Should we look at the documentation? Getting started. That was fantastic. Routing. Here we go. Oh, this looks pretty good. This looks like exactly what we want. App.get. So we pass along the verb, just like you did. You do that with your HTTP server? Okay. So we pass along the verb, then we specify the path, and then this should look familiar, the callback function. And the callback function gets a request and a response passed into it that we will have access to. So these are objects that Express gives us that enables us to better read the information coming in and formulate a response going out. Okay, so why don't we set this up? So we say app.get, and we'll set up our browse route first. So our browse route is going to respond with all of our cookies to the client, okay? So we're going to say get, why don't we say cookies? Does that work for everybody? / cookies. Then it takes a callback with a request and a response. And how would we send back a EJS template? Response dot render. There we go. And why don't we just call this one cookies? Okay, so we've set up a path. We've got our route here. It accepts get request to / cookies. Right? Does everything look good? Cool. Kill our server, restart it. There we go. App is listening. And we're going to visit localhost / cookies. And we'll see a bunch of delicious. No default engine was specified and no extension was provided. What did I forget to do? EJS. We need to tell Express to use EJS, right? So we've got our app. We say app.set view engine EJS. Okay? So now we've got our view engine set up. We told Express, listen, whenever we call render, we want you to render the cookies template, the EJS template. Kill our server, start it back up again, visit / cookies, and cannot find module EJS. What did I forget again? Can't find a module. It's a very common thing when you try to do something and it says I can't find the module. What did I forget to do? Install that module. So we're going to npm install EJS. Perfect. Start the server again. Awesome. Refresh the page, and we get a new error. But we're getting different errors every time, and that's the key. Error-driven development, as KV likes to say. Failed to look up view cookies in the views directories, in the views directory. So it went into, it tried to look for a views directory, and it couldn't find the views directory, and it couldn't find a template called cookies in that directory. Okay? So obviously, we need to make a new directory called views, and we need to add a cookies file to that. So let's jump into that really quickly. And with the help of VS Code, we're going to very quickly scaffold out a basic HTML page. We're going to call this. How did I do that? Oh, back. So you start typing HTML, and then you go down to HTML5, and you can see on the bottom, it's showing you how it's going to build it out, and then you press enter, and you immediately get an HTML page. And this is great because I can never remember any of this meta stuff. I'd have to look it up every single time. So VS Code is very helpful in that regard. So these are our cookies, and we'll just put it in H1, and we'll say all the cookies. Perfect. I have faith now that when I start my server up, we're actually going to see something in the browser. Hooray! Is it noon yet? Okay, not quite. Perfect. We were able to send a response over HTTP to the client, but we haven't served back the cookies. So how are we going to tackle the problem of putting all of our cookies into this template? Yes, we need to incorporate JavaScript into this somehow. So how would we pass data to our cookies template? We use something that we like to call template vars, right? Template variables. This is a template, and we're going to pass along some variables that we can stick into there. Okay, so let's declare template vars will be an object. And what's our object going to be in response to a browse request? It should return all of our cookies, right? So what is our object actually going to be for cookies, for a request to browse cookies? is it going to be a subset of the cookies object, or is it going to be essentially the entire cookies object? Where would that get us if we sent back the values of each key? So we'd need to send along a little more than just the ID, right? We'd have to send along, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to send along the entire cookies object. So we could do something like this, cookies. Is everyone okay with ES6 shorthand? So instead of writing cookies, cookies, in ES6, if the key is the same as the value, then you can just write cookies. Okay? Everybody good? Awesome. And then we need to pass that along here, so we pass that as a second argument to our template. We say, take this template and add these variables into it. So now we have access to cookies. Awesome. So let's jump back to our cookies. And we're going to bring in some EJS here. So this is how we embed JavaScript right inside of our HTML. So we'll just do a standard for loop for const cookie in cookies, right? Because it's an object, so we have to use in. Opening brace. I always like to include the closing brace so that you don't forget, because that can be a hard error to track down. What is the difference between this and this? In your template. Does anyone know? Anything? Okay. What is the difference between this and this? What happens when I add on an equal sign? That's exactly what it's going to do. It's going to print out the value of whatever's inside of there. This here will not render to the screen. That's not going to show up as part of the template. But anything with the equal sign will output to the template. Okay? So this is how we say, so we've got our cookies. Why don't we put this into an unordered list? That might be fun. Close the UL. There we go. So we've got our cookie. So for right now, why don't we just output cookie.name and see how that goes? Okay. Restart the server. And why do I have to restart the server every time? That's right, because I made changes on the server side, so those changes won't be reflected if we just tried to refresh the browser. So now let's see what's going on. All the cookies. Why are you not coming back? Did I forget to save? What are you doing to me? No errors in the console. Oh, yes. Is it something about the loop? Sorry? Oh, this you can use const in here. This won't make a difference because it creates a new variable every single time through the loop. So let's take a look at, do we not have a name? Because one of the things is that it will not render. We do have a name. Let's see if we can get any of the other ones to print. Because one of the things about EJS is if it's undefined, then it won't actually print. Let's see what's going on here. Kill this. App.js. Okay, listening on port 3000. And nothing. Empty UL. Well, this is fantastic. Well, it's cookie in cookies. What if we send this over in a different way? What if we do that? It's probably just in how I'm making reference to it. Now it's saying that cookies is not defined. Okay. Let's go back to how we had it before. We're passing along cookies. These are cookies. Why are you not? This is an unplanned bug here. Why you not show all the cookies? What is going on? Do we have access to data? Okay. We have access to data, but we don't have access to cookies. Why not? Object, object. Okay. So cookies is an object. Yeah. What are you doing to me? Okay. Falls, fails. Let's look at the notes from last time. So we use a different way to loop through our cookies. Sorry? Oh, okay. Let's take a look at our view. Last time we talked about bikes. For const key in bikes. Yes, sir. Cookie is a key. That's correct. Thank you, Garrett. There we go. That's exactly right. Name, ID, and ingredients. Did everybody hear that? That was absolutely my mistake. The for in loops return the key. And I was looking for the value. So the value is actually in, you're correct, it is cookies at key dot, whatever it is. There we go. Okay. Hey, there we go. Something I didn't do is I didn't wrap all these in LIs. So now that we know what's going on, let's give this an LI. And we'll go with an H2, and we'll say cookies at key.name, bracket, cookies at key.id. %. There we go. Save that. Hey. And I've got an extra one for some reason. Right there.
Could you explain how do you loop through that again?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we were passed in the cookies object, right?
Yeah.
And so using a for in, which I forgot, it doesn't actually give you back the cookie, it gives you back the key, the index. So then we were able to access inside of cookies, go in through the index, and then grab the name. Yeah, because those were defined on our cookies. We have a name, an ingredients, and an ID for each one. Okay. And so we can actually strip off our data here. There we go. Okay, so now we're able to listen for a request to /cookies, and we can retrieve all of our cookies, and we see all of our IDs there. Okay, so that takes care of browse. What about read? Let's take a quick look at our README to see what a read looks like. Get /resource and then whatever the ID is, however we're identifying that particular resource. Okay, so we have app.get cookies, and then we talked about it earlier. How do we specify a variable in our path? Colon. We'll call this ID. And then we have a callback that gets a request and a response. And so we need to come up with some template bars and a response.render, and we'll call this template cookie and pass it the template bars. Okay, so first things first, how do we get the particular cookie that the client is requesting? Well, we can get the ID if we want to just store it here as rec.params. Whatever we called this. If we called it name, it would be name. We called it ID. So we have access to the ID. Okay, so now that we have access to the key, how do we retrieve that from our cookies object in memory? Our cookie is going to be cookies. That's right. If you know the name of the property that you're looking up, you use the dot syntax. If it's dynamic, as in a variable passed in from the outside, something like that, you use square brackets, right? Cool, so now we're retrieving our cookie, our particular cookie that the user has looked for. The client has requested, and we're sending that back. But we're going to see another error because we don't actually have a view or a template called cookie. There we go. Cookie. Okay, let's scaffold out our HTML again. Cookie. There we go, H1, just one cookie. Okay, so this time we don't need to loop because we just have the one object. So we can output, let's put this into an H2. We'll output cookie.name. Forgot percent equals cookie.id. There we go. And below that, in an H3, we can have the cookie.ingredients. There we go. Does everything look okay? Awesome. So why don't we try and make a request to /cookie/someID? Site can't be reached, obviously. There we go. And refresh. So we see all of our cookies. Let's visit cookie/2. Rec is not defined because I renamed it to request. You're still going to be broken. There we go. Just one cookie. I forgot my closing brace. Want to make sure this looks good. There we go. I suppose that I should put in there ingredients because chocolate just floating by itself doesn't really make a lot of sense. There we go. So there's /2, /3, and /1. Okay? So we can navigate through there. So now that we have this built up, we can actually wire up our app to be a little bit more responsive. We can add some functionality, well, not necessarily responsive. We can add some functionality to make it easier to navigate through so that we don't have to continually type into the URL. Okay? So why don't we put at the top an anchor tag, and if I want to send the users back to the home page or all of the cookies, where would I direct them with this anchor tag? To cookies. That's correct. And now we'll see that that appears there. We've got our home button, take us back to all of the cookies. And how would we structure an anchor tag to wrap this H2 element? Let's just wrap the entire thing. Where would we direct this to? Obviously, we need to go to /cookies, but where does how do we provide the ID for this cookie? We can't, we wouldn't use the colon in the template. We do have to have a slash, but then we can actually just use our EJS to put in cookies at key. Actually, it would be the key, right? Because our ID is the same as the ID inside. If it wasn't, then we do cookies at key.id. But in this case, we can actually just pass along the key. And if we take a look at that, and we make the DevTools a little larger. There we go. Now we can see that we have an anchor h1 goes to cookie/1, cookie/2, and cookie/3. So now a user can just navigate through our app by just clicking on the various links. Okay? How are we doing? 10:51. Almost there. Not quite enough time, close that out, to fully implement edit, which would be our next one in line. But we could add to our cookie template, rather than sending back a completely new form, why don't we put the form on the bottom of our cookie template? Let's add a form. So HTML forms have two things, two attributes that are important to us. What are those two attributes? That's right, method. And what are we going to pass along as a method for this? We want to edit the cookie. So if we jump back to our README, we want to edit. So what kind of request are we going to make? What's our method going to be? Post. That's right. And they have an action. And the action is the path that you would direct the user to. Or you're actually going to be directing this post request to. So we want to edit. And in our case, this is going to be cookies. So where do we want to send this post request to? /cookies, / and we need to specify that ID again, right? So we have cookie.id. And so this tells our HTML what to do when this form gets submitted. When it gets submitted, send a post request to this endpoint, okay, with whatever data is inside of the form. So let's say that we can edit the cookie name. For name, there we go. We'll say new name. ID equals name. This is for the label. So this ID and this 4 have to match up. This is for screen readers and assistive devices and things to say this label is associated with this input. Okay? So 4 has to match up with the ID. But in order for this to actually get through to our server, it's going to create an object. And how do we tell it what the key is for this value in an input field? There's another attribute that we have to give it. How do we name the key? Anyway. Okay, we actually use the attribute name. And in our case, since we're changing the name of the cookie, why don't we actually, just to differentiate, we'll call this new name. That way we don't have name equals name, because that could be confusing. So when this gets sent along to the server, the body of the post request is going to have a key of new name and a value of whatever was in this input field when the form was submitted. Okay? If we were structuring out more, then we'd have ingredients and ID if we were, so inclined to change that up. So we have our ID and our name. We'll put in a line break. And then we need a button. Type equals submit. And we'll call this button edit cookie. So now, when we navigate to our particular page, we now have a little form at the bottom where we can type in a new name for the cookie. And let's type in, I don't know, what are some other cookie names? Rainbow. Edit cookie. Cannot post to /cookie/1. So we see that it was able to take our method and our action and try to submit a request. And we can actually see that in the network tab of the DevTools. Network. Let's try that again. We're going to submit. I don't want to see XHR. I want to see all. We're going to try and make a submission. And it came back 404, not found. And if we dive into that, we see that we made a request. The request URL was localhost /3000 /cookie/1. The method was post. The response that came back from the server was 404 not found, because we haven't wired up that route yet. But if we go all the way down to the bottom, We get through our request headers. You can see all the different information that was passed along on our behalf, including the user agent that we talked about last week. And then we see our form data was actually sent along. This is the body of the request. We can actually see it right here. New name is rainbow. So this is the structure of our request. This is what our HTML form actually did for us. And all we had to do was tell it post, action, and the name of the input fields. And it packages it up for us and sends it along as form data to be interpreted on our server. And when we come back after the break, it's 10:56. We'll break for 10 minutes. When we come back, we will handle this error. Cool. Thanks. All right. We still have the rest of bread to get through, and we only have 50 minutes left. So, where we left off was we tried to rename our chocolate cookie to rainbow cookie, and we found out that we cannot post to /cookies/ID. So we need to set that up. Okay, very similar to the other ones. We're going to listen for a post request to /cookies/ID. This should be very familiar by now that our callback gets a request and a response. So how now do we get access to whatever the user typed into this form? Where is that in our request? Where is that in the post request? What did HTML do with all of the data? Put it in the body, that's right. Do we have access natively to request.body? No, we don't. We need to bring in our first infinity stone and toss in our middleware. So what do we need? What package do we need to be able to parse the body? It is a body parser. That's exactly right. Let's kill this. npm install. Let's clear this. Font size still okay? I was playing with it over the break. Still good? Okay. So we have a couple different options for installing npm packages you may or may not be aware of. We have npm I. Ultimately, we want to bring in the body parser, right? You can use npm I for install. You can use npm install. But my personal favorite, which I hopefully haven't showed you yet, is isn't all. And believe it or not, that's perfectly valid. People were misspelling install so many times in this particular way that they just decided to alias install. And you can type in isn't all. So there we go. So now we have our body parser. And there's one more thing that I'd like to bring in is a logger. And what a logger does is it helps, because you'll notice that whenever we were running, other than these massive errors that we kept getting, all we'd get is node app.js, and it would just sit here. And we make requests to, we navigate to the home page, we navigate to the sugar cookie page, and it just sits here and it doesn't really tell us anything. By default, Express doesn't have a logger. So I'll show you very quickly what a logger does. So we have two packages that we need to bring in. We have the body parser equals require body.parser. Thank you, VS Code. And then we are going to bring in Morgan. And we will require Morgan. There we go. OK, so first off, let's look at Morgan. So Morgan is, it's just one logger. There's various different loggers. This is just a very user-friendly one. I recommend bringing this in any time that you're creating an API so that you get some kind of feedback of what's happening with your API, and it's not just a black box that's sitting there with servers listening on until you hit an error. So we bring in Morgan, obviously, require Morgan, just like we did. But Morgan has a bunch of different options. There's predefined formats here. We have a combined format that will show the remote address, the remote user, the method, the status, the result length, stuff like that. Let's look for here. This sounds like us. Dev. Sure. Let's just go with dev. So we'll get the method, the URL, the status, the response time in milliseconds, and the content length for some reason. But you can't win them all, I guess. OK. So we need to bring this in. And we need to say app.use. Hopefully that's big enough. Whoa, where do we go? There we go. App.use Morgan, and then whatever logging form that we want, whatever output form that we want. So we selected dev. I selected dev. Scroll back up. Stream, skip, response. Anyway, let's jump over here. So we have our app. We're going to say app.use Morgan, and we're going to pass in dev. And before we do anything with the body parser, I just want to show you how this is going to revolutionize our app development experience. So here we go. Let's clear this, make it go up to the top. I'm not overselling this at all. Okay, here we go. We're going to jump back in, and we're going to visit the home page. Okay, same as before. But this is what Morgan does for us. Can everybody see that there? Hopefully I can make this a little bigger. Okay, so Morgan actually console logged for us the method of the request, the path that the client went to, the status, it was returned 200 OK because it was able to respond, how long it took, and the content length of the response. Okay, so let's try and navigate around. We go to chocolate cookie, navigate back to the home page, and go to oatmeal cookie. And now you can see that we are actually fielding these requests from our server. We actually have some kind of output, and that's the power of the logger, is instead of just sitting there with an empty console, we're actually able to see, oh, somebody made a GET request to cookie/2, then somebody went back to the home page, then they went to cookie/3. Okay? And if we go to the home page and we do something like refresh, well, you can see that we went back to the home page and back to the home page again. Okay? So that's why I bring in a logger. We get some output. And like I said, if we look at the documentation, there are many different output formats. So we chose dev, and you can see how that maps to method, URL, status, response time in milliseconds, and the content length. Method, path, status, response time in milliseconds, content length. Okay? Hopefully that's clear. Yes, yeah, that's fantastic. You can see how long your server is chugging for, because you can see the first time it took 12.2 milliseconds, which doesn't seem like an incredibly long time. But by the end, it's probably doing some kind of caching. So when it came back to this point, it took less than half a millisecond to respond. And we can see things like this, and we can also see, once we start making post requests, we can see those post requests coming in. So that's why we bring in a logger. Now we need to utilize our body parser. npm body parser. Let's see what we need to do for this one. Okay. npm install body parser, require body parser, and here we go. So we have a bunch of different options again for how we want to use our body parser. Remember when I said unopinionated? This is unopinionated. We get to dictate how we're going to get what our bodies are going to look like so that we can parse them back into data that we can use. Hopefully that makes sense. So we have a body parser.raw that parses the body as a buffer. Well, that doesn't sound super fantastic. I don't want to have to deal with that. Body parser.text. So it'll parse all of the bodies as a string. Again, that's not super fantastic. Let's see. Ooh, URL encoded. That sounds like fun. So to demonstrate, let's just do this. Here we go. Let's change this from post to get. And we'll just take this out for a second. Actually, let's take both of them out just for a second. And I want to show you what the default behavior of an HTML form is. Okay? So let's make sure our server's running. It is. Let's just kill it. Make sure everything's good. Refresh. Okay, we're going to go to sugar cookie. And I'm going to rename this one. I don't know why rainbow cookies are on my brain. And I'm going to submit the form by clicking edit cookie. Okay, so two things happened. One, the page reloaded, right? The default behavior, if you don't pass in a path, is to call it on to actually make a request to the same path that you're already on. So it actually just made a GET request. We can actually see that. It made a GET request to /cookies/1. And then, what is this? It comes after a question mark in the path. We talked about it ever so briefly yesterday. These are what are called query string parameters. So it actually, and we can see this up here, if I can zoom in. There we go. So by default, it makes a GET request, and GET requests, everything happens in the URL, right? So it took our new name, hopefully you can see that, our new name equals rainbow cookies. And it actually did what's called URL encoding. So it made it into a valid URL. It replaced the spaces, it will replace any kind of characters or anything to make it a valid URL. So because if we took out the space between rainbow and cookies, then that would break. That wouldn't be a valid URL anymore, right? So this is the default behavior. A GET request to the same page that it's on, URL encoded, okay? So this should help us make our decision about what kind of body parser we want to use. So if I set this back, make sure that everything's working. Okay, so now that we know that the default behavior is URL encoding, why would we fight against that? We might as well just say, fine, if you're going to send me URL encoded stuff, then my parser needs to know that it's URL encoded in order to parse it. Parse simply means to take it from one format and turn it into another format. So what we want is we want this, where's my, there we go. We want to turn this new name equals rainbow cookies into an object. And that's what the body parser does. It will take everything that was in the body, parse it into something that we can utilize as JavaScript developers, a JavaScript object, on the body. So we can access it with request.body. But we have to tell it how the data is coming in. Otherwise, it won't know how to parse that data. Okay? And URL encoding is not the only kind. Okay? Obviously, as you could see, we had raw, we had text. If we keep scrolling, oh, where is, there should be one for JSON. You can bring in JSON as well if you wanted. So it depends on what communication, how it's encoded that your server is expecting. Okay? So we're going to use bodyparser.url encoded, and then it takes an options. And the options are extended. So the extended option, so we do it like this. We say app.use. I like to keep all of my stuff together, so we declared the app, and then we have our set and our use and everything, so you know where it all is. It just has to happen before you actually start setting up routes and stuff. So we usually do it right at the top. We bring in our body parser, and we invoke it, and we pass it an object, and we say extended. And in our case, I'm going to say false. So what does extended do for us? The extended option allows you to choose between parsing the URL encoded data with the query string library or the QS library. The extended syntax allows for rich objects and arrays to be encoded into the URL encoded format. So since we're not sending over objects and arrays, we're just sending over strings, with just key value pairs. We're dealing with primitives, right? We're not dealing with advanced data structures. So we can say extended is false. We don't need to support retrieving arrays being passed over, right? Because we're not sending over arrays. So hopefully that makes sense. So now we have a body parser. And now we can actually retrieve our data by saying request.body. And request.body will be an object that's got our key value pairs inside of it. Okay? So knowing that, and let's just console log request.body to take a look at this. And then our server's going to hang, but that's fine. Kill this, and let's make sure we have enough room. Node app.js. Here we go. Body parser has been deprecated, apparently. Well, there you go. Okay. So we are going to change this to rainbow cookies. Edit cookie. Okay, that's just going to hang for a second. And we see that we got in, oh, did I not change the cookie thing back? Apparently I didn't. Cookie. Yeah, you're all set up, right? Oh, you know what hang on, let's go back to the home page. Sugar cookie, are you still running? Yep. Why are you still submitting to this page? Oh, here we go. Sorry, that should have been a post. Let's restart the server. There we go. We're back in. Refresh this. Go to the home page, sugar cookie, and rainbow cookie. Edit the cookie, and we're just hanging. You can see down in the bottom left corner, super tiny, it says waiting on localhost because we haven't actually responded with anything. All right, the HTTP protocol is a request and a response. So our client has made a request to the server, but we haven't responded with any. We haven't called response.render, response.redirect, response.send. We haven't done anything. So right now, our client is just waiting. And it will wait and wait and wait until it eventually times out. But we can see that we have an object. So we console logged request.body. We can see that request.body is an object with a key of new name and a value of rainbow cookie. And those map to a name of new name and whatever value was typed into the input field. Okay? So now we have access to the data that was sent over in the form. So we can access it with request.body.newName. Okay? So let's make use of that. Set this to const new name equals request.body.newName. Okay, so now we have a new name. We have the ID, request.params.id. So based on these two pieces of information, how do we update our cookies object? We have the ID, the key, and we have a new name. Cookies bracket, well, new name isn't gonna, we need to pass along the index, whatever key value that we want to grab, right? So we'd say cookies at ID dot name equals new name. Okay, so we're saying go into the cookies object at this key, retrieve this value, and set it to the new name that got passed in.
And those brackets make it dynamic, right? So
That's right. Yeah. So it'll actually be interpreted. Whatever this is, JavaScript will interpret it and then plug it back in. Okay, so that's cool. So we can now update our object in memory. Fantastic. We can change the name of our cookies. But there's one more thing that we need to do, because remember, our client is just hanging here waiting for a response. That's exactly what we're going to do. Instead of calling response.render and saying that we want to render some page or something, what we're going to use is called the what is it? Post redirect get. It's PRG. If you want to look at it, I think there's a link that I have in the README to PRG. And what it essentially boils down to is if you get a GET request, then render a template. If you're answering a POST request, then redirect the user. Okay, so we don't actually want to go through the trouble. We already have two endpoints that are all set up. They've got their template bars and everything. They're all set up. Why would we redo that work? Instead of just saying, great, we were successfully able to update the cookies. Now let's redirect you somewhere. So we have, our user was able to edit a particular cookie. Where should we redirect them to? Well, probably right back to the cookie page that they were on, right? So they could immediately see their change happens, right? So we're going to change this to response.redirect, and then we pass in a string. In our case, we'll do this. And we're going to go to /cookies/ and then we need to include the ID, right? And we have it right here. So we update the object in memory. We pull the new name off of the body. We pull the ID out of the path. We update the object in memory. And then we redirect the user to an already established route. OK? Now let's see what this actually looks like in practice. Kill this. Node app.js. There we go. See, it eventually timed out. We want to go to /cookies. There we go. Let's rename sugar cookie to rainbow cookie. Edit cookie. And now it's rainbow cookie. And if we wanted to change it to double chocolate cookie, We hit edit, and now it's double chocolate cookie. And if we go back to the home page, we see double chocolate cookie now. Okay? The interesting thing is what happens in our logger here. So we got a get request to our home page, 200. Then we got a get request to cookie/1 to see that particular cookie. Then a post request was made. But you notice that we didn't get a 200, we got a 302. And what did the 300 series usually indicate? Let's see what the cats have to say. 302, found. Well, that wasn't very useful to us. But it has actually redirected the user. So it said that what you're looking for is not here, go somewhere else. We made a post, and then we redirected the user. We sent them a 300 series. So what did that do? We didn't actually handle that on the server. It's literally like somebody knocks on your apartment door, and you say, oh, no, you're not looking for me, you're looking for the neighbor. Well, you don't pick up that person and carry them down the hallway and put them in front of that door, right? It's up to them. The client then has to go down the hallway and knock on the next apartment door, right? Same thing happens with here. We just said, okay, that's great. You posted to here, but I'm going to redirect you. I'm going to send you somewhere else. So then the client has to make another GET request on their own. I want to make that very clear that we sent a redirection and went back to the client, and then the client had to make another GET request. We didn't just handle this on the server. Okay? Hopefully that's clear. That this resulted in 2 requests happening from the client. They made the post request, they were redirected, then they had to make a GET request for the resource. Okay? Hopefully that's clear. Yes?
Any chance you can show the browser and this side by side and then like click on stuff?
I can certainly try. There we go. Those cats look great. Okay, we'll close this. And maybe if I is that too small to read? That's still okay? Okay, so we click on oatmeal cookie, and you can see that get/cookie/3 popped up, and we actually this time got a 304. Let's look at those pesky cats. What does 304 mean? One of my favorite ones. Not modified. So in other words, what the server responded with was it said, you've already got this page, you've already seen this data. It hasn't been modified since the last time you saw it, so I'm not going to go through the trouble of sending you the new file. Just use the one that you've cached. Use the one that you've already got. So we got 304 not modified, just like these cats. Not modified all the way down. Okay, so we've got our oatmeal cookie, and we're going to rename this to any other cookies? Chocolate mint. There we go. We're going to edit this, and we see that we got a post request to /cookie/3, which we responded with a redirection to get/cookie/3. Did you see that pop up? Okay. Does anybody have any questions about this? Does this make sense? What's happening here?
And this is all just from like a response to our redirect.
That's exactly what that is. We operated on an object in memory. We could have put something into a database, something like that. And then we told the client, what you're looking for isn't here, go look somewhere else. Okay? So let's pull this off again. Make that nice and big. There we go. Okay. So, how are we doing for time? 11:34. Awesome. Okay, so we have browse, read, edit. We have 2 more pieces of bread that we need to deal with. Add and delete. Okay? So for add, we're actually going to need 2. Because we could put, let's go to our home page. We could put a form down on the bottom of it, like we did here. But why don't we actually redirect the user to a cookies form, where they can actually create a new cookie? Okay? So we're going to need 2. We're going to need an app.get. And the convention is usually /new to return the form. Okay? So we're going to need this. And we're also going to need a post that listens to /cookies. So we're going to add. So we're going to say post and then slash resource. So in our case, it's cookies. So we're going to make a post to cookies. There we go. And again, that takes a request and a response. Okay, so first things first, let's response.render new cookie.ejs. And we'll have to touch views / new cookie.ejs. There we go. And of course, we don't need that .ejs, do we? Okay, perfect. Do we need to pass any template variables along to this form? Probably not. We could, but we're not going to in this case. We're just going to render an HTML form. So we're going to go into here, HTML5, perfect. We'll call this new cookie. Create a new cookie. There we go. So we're going to need our old friend, the HTML form. A form has two attributes that we're interested in, right? Action. So we'll start with method. And this is going to be post, and our action is going to go to /cookies. Okay? Because that's what we set up in our app. We said make a post request to /cookies. So our form is going to make a post request to /cookies. Okay? Label for, this will be for the name. Input ID equals name. Name equals name. Self-closing. Put in a line break. And we'll have a label for ingredients. Ingredients, there we go. Input, ID equals ingredients, name equals ingredients. Put in another line break, and then our button type equals submit. There we go. Okay, so is everyone clear on why I specified this ID here? You don't need to. The only reason I'm doing that is to bind this label with this for to this input field. Okay? That way they are together. So here we go. We should have a new cookie form now. Server. Oh, and we're going to need some way to get to this new cookie form, aren't we? Let's go into cookie. Let's add our traditional link back to the home page, just in case the user decides that they don't actually want to deal with this. And then we'll go into our cookies. And down at the very bottom, underneath our unordered list, we'll go to /cookies /new. There we go. So we just add an anchor tag to the bottom of our cookie list here. Create a new cookie. And when we click on that, what the? Name is not defined. Name cannot read property name of undefined. But why on earth are we in cookie.ejs? I specifically said new cookie. Why are we in here? The obvious answer is that something else is catching, like some other route is answering this. We didn't get a cannot get cookie /new. We have an error. Our template is trying to show this page instead of our new cookie form. The order that you declare these route matchers in matters. Okay, so what's happening is we have a GET request down here for, if I collapse these might make it a little easier to see. Okay, So we have a get request to /cookie/new. Do we have another get request that we've already defined that has an extremely similar structure to that? Read. Read is exactly right. So what's happening is this route is catching it, and it assumes that NEW is the ID of a cookie. And there's no cookie with that ID, so what comes back from our cookie database is undefined, no cookie name. And that's why we're responding with this cookie template instead of new cookie that we wanted, okay? It works from the top to the bottom. So in order to prevent this from happening, we actually have to cut our add and move it up above read so that this one will catch before this one. But since this one doesn't have a variable in it, it will match precisely to that one, and anything else will fall through. Anything that's not /new will fall through to the other one. So if we start our server back up and refresh, hey, there's our new cookie form. So does that make sense to everybody what was happening there? It was another route was grabbing it. So if you see unexpected behavior like that, look through your routes and see if you have, maybe there's another one that's catching that, and it's not getting all the way down to the one that I want to catch it. Okay? So now we have our new cookie. But we haven't. We've seen this error enough already, I think. So we've set this up, our new cookie. Our body is going to have two key value pairs in it. It's going to have a name and an ingredients. Okay? So when we handle this, let's say const name equals request.body.name, const ingredients equals request.body.ingredients. Okay. So we have new name and ingredients, and we want to add these to our cookies. What do we have to do to create a new object inside of this object? That's right. So we want to add a new key where the value is a cookie object. Okay? So we could set this up and just say cookies at 4, but that's going to hard code it. So we could use another workaround. We could randomly generate some kind of string. We could do something like that. Or if we want to get really fancy, we could use a universal, what is it, UUID? Universally unique? Yes, universally unique identifier, a UUID. So there's this fantastic package, npm package UUID, and what it will do is it will actually generate random strings that are pretty much guaranteed to be unique, because there's so many different values that could possibly exist that we shouldn't end up with any collisions. So we're going to bring this package in, and we're actually going to use version 4 here. So we have to require v4, and it's going to give us this massive thing back. But at least we know that when we create new cookies, we're not going to be accidentally overwriting keys or having to hard code keys or do some other kind of weird math on this. So I'm going to npm I UUID. There we go. And then we're going to bring it in. Const UUID equals require UUID/v4. There we go. That's what I need to do. Yep. And then we can just invoke it. It's just a function, and it will return a random character string. And important to us, separated with hyphens or dashes, if you will. Because we don't need this entire thing. This would be kind of crazy. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to split it on the hyphen and just grab the first part, because that'll be unique enough for our purposes. So when it comes time to create a new one, we're going to say const ID equals UUID invoked, dot split on the hyphen, and we just want to grab the 0th element. That'll give us enough. That'll give us what, 7 characters? 8 characters? That'll be more than enough. Sorry? Mm-hmm. Yes. It might be. It might be, but for our demo purposes here, we're not going to have any collisions. But you're right. We may end up at some point, if you were inserting like millions or billions of records, then yeah, you'd probably end up with a collision, and you'd want to use this entire thing. But for our purposes, I think this would make a crazy key, which is why I'm just stripping off the first bit. Okay. So we've got our UUID. So we have our ID. So we go cookies at our new ID equals, and then we're going to set up an object literal. So it's got an ID, a name, and some ingredients. And we're just using the ES6 shorthand. Instead of typing out ingredients is ingredients, since they're the exact same, we can just use ingredients. Okay? So now we have our new object literal that's going to be inserted into our cookies. And we need to do one more thing. We've done something with the data that came in. We answered the route. We did something with the data. But we need to do something with our user. Redirect our user. That's right. And where would we redirect them to if they have just created a new cookie? To the cookies page. There we go. So we'll redirect the user. OK, so if everything's working, we should now be able to generate new cookies and add them. Okay, let's go back to the home page, create a new cookie. And what do we have right now? Everything reset. Perfect. So I can use double chocolate. And create a new cookie. And now we see that we have a double chocolate cookie with this crazy ID, but that's totally fine. Our app can handle that, no problem. We navigated to there. We see our ingredients. We can change it to and everything still works just fine. And we can add new cookies, whatever we want. What did we have? Chocolate mint. So it'll be mint and chocolate, presumably. Create a new cookie. And now we have a chocolate mint cookie. Awesome. Does anyone have any questions about how we got to this point? Because we have one more verb to deal with, and we have 12 minutes. So this should work out great. So down the bottom here, we need to deal with delete. So we're going to answer a post request to /resource/ID/delete. Okay? So we need app.post /cookies/ID/delete. And it's going to get passed in a request and a response. There we go. So let's grab our ID, request.params.id. How do we, if we know the key, how do we delete something from a JavaScript object? There's a special operator that we can use. Has anyone ever, and you could probably make a guess at what the operator is. It's the delete operator. Dun dun. Okay. And all we have to do is say delete object key. And it will just delete that key from the object. Okay? That's all we have to do is just give it the delete operator. Super simple. Delete cookies at ID. And that's it. That will wipe that cookie out of our object and out of memory. Okay? We answered a post. What do we need to do? After a post, what does our PRG tell us, our post redirect get? We need to redirect, right? And let's redirect back to cookies. And we need some way for this to happen. So why don't we go into our cookies, and we will attach on a form on the end with a method equals post and an action that goes to slash cookies slash key slash delete. There we go. So we got our form, and our form will simply have a button, type equals submit, because we don't actually have to pass anything really along with this form. We just need to pass along that action, and we'll name this delete. And there we go. So if we check this out now, jump back over here, each one of these has a delete button. Okay. So if we hit delete, let's see what happens. Is the 2 little chocolate cookie going to disappear? Cannot post to slash cookies slash this slash delete. Did I forget to restart my server? There we go. Yeah, everything should be fine now. Let's go to slash cookies. Okay. Which cookie is going to get knocked off of this list? Sugar cookie, chocolate cookie, oatmeal cookie? Oatmeal. Gone. Just like that. No warning, no confirmation, just completely gone, and the page refreshed. Sugar cookie, gone. Chocolate cookie, gone. And if we want to see something new, then we need to add it. Create a new cookie. There we go. And we see that we have a new cookie that's got oatmeal and raisins in it. Okay, so that wrapped up bread. Browse, read, edit, add, and delete. We were able to tackle all of that using HTTP and Express. So implement CRUD/bread over HTTP with Express. Use forms to submit HTTP requests. We absolutely did that. And practice debugging Express. You'll probably agree that we saw quite a few errors today. They're very common. Once you get used to seeing them, you realize how to fix them. It becomes very evident, oh, I've seen that one before, I know what to do. I'm missing that package, or I haven't set up that route, or this is the wrong parameter. Yes? Would update be add? Oh, in CRUD, the add is create. Update is edit. Let's change that to /edit. There we go. Let's see how we're doing for time. 11:53. Do you have any questions? I can show you one other little trick if you're interested. Right now, when we have a user, so we have our website responding, but when a user visits this, they get a cannot get. And when they try and visit anything else, if we type in /something, cannot get /something. So there's a really quick way to handle this. Make sure it's all the way at the very bottom. You can have app.get star, as in anything that didn't match any of the previous routes, handle it here. And just like everything else, we have a request and a response. And all we're going to do is response.redirect to /cookies. So if a user goes off the path, kill the server, restart it. If a user goes off the path, they type /something, they're immediately redirected back to /cookies. If they try to visit localhost /, they're directed to /cookies. Okay? We just need this wildcard, and it will match every GET request to the server. Every path, everything, so that we can keep our users on path, on track, and they're not going to see cannot get this, cannot get that. Okay? 11:54. And yes?
Can we talk about the parts where you connected the app.js to the HTML?
So sending the template variables? Is that? So sending like, where's an example of our template bars? Right here? Is that what you mean? Okay. So we have the cookie template, for instance. Let's close everything else. So we've got this. And can I split this to the right? Is this going to be too crazy? A little bit crazy. There we go. Is that still big enough? Okay. So we have our cookie template here. So we're saying to Express, we already told it what rendering engine we're using. We're using EJS. So go into the views folder, grab the cookie template, and pass it the variables, whatever variables that we passed along. Okay? So in this case, it's cookie. So then inside of cookie.ejs, we have access to a variable called cookie. And anytime we're inside of these special little braces, this means we're performing some kind of JavaScript. We might be doing a for loop. We might be directly interpolating a name, something like that. So whatever we pass in to template vars is available inside of our template. And if you needed more, you would just add more keys to the template vars object. And obviously, you also don't have to declare a variable. You could just pass in an anonymous object, and that will work just the same. You don't have to set it to a constant if you don't want to. Did that answer what you were? Perfect. Okay. Any other questions before I let you go?
Could you review the delete again?
Yeah. So we grabbed the ID from the request parameters. I'll close this. So we grabbed the ID out of the request parameters, and then we just used the delete operator. So we said cookies at this ID, just delete it. Delete that key and its value out of the object.
So what if we didn't declare the ID?
If we didn't declare the ID,
With the constant ID.
oh, you could just use request.params.id right here. So same thing. There we go. Any other questions? Cool. Awesome. Enjoy the rest of your day. If you think of anything later, I'm available on Slack. Thank you very much.